session, and thank you for coming for the session too. I think this is one of the crux panel sessions for the whole event, to be honest, because a couple years back we were using AI and LLMs for like toy projects. Now we're at the stage of deploying for real-world applications, and we have people spanning from both public, private, and AI startups with the sovereign AI. It's a rare combination, I should say. Because it's going to be a tight session, I believe. I also did try to hone with a couple themes to be running through. First thing I wish to focus on was scaling AI from lab to live market, and secondly, regulation, explainability, and maybe the trust gap when it comes to using AI for actual real-world applications, and finally the next frontier of collaboration and human oversight when it comes to using responsible AI. So enough with that. Maybe I'll pass the mic around for a intro from each of our speakers, and then we can hop on to the first theme.
Sounds good. Thanks. My name is Eric Jiaowei. I'm a director of research at RBC Borealis. My team works on Gen AI applications.
Hello everyone, my name is Hye-young Yoon, and I am working as the senior researcher in Korean Financial Telecommunications, and I am also the AI policy director in the Korean Associations for the Professional Engineers, and it's really nice to see you each other.
Hello everyone, my name is Bhaskarjit, and I'm currently working as head of AI research for financial services at Domain, which I recently joined. But before Domain, I used to work at BlackRock, where I used to lead investment AI and risk management AI at BlackRock for risk management managers and portfolio managers and traders.
Hello, my name is Sojang Kim from Bank of Korea, and I'm working on mostly time series modeling and LLM-based text and test development. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Ju. So I think we can hop on into the first theme, scaling from the lab to the markets. And I think it's going to be a very instructive moment for the audience too, because it's quite different using AI for actual real-world applications and just playing within your guardrails. So maybe because you're here, Eric, you can start off maybe sharing us like a use case of how AI is being used or in the process of being used for actual world applications.
Sounds good. I actually talked about quite a few applications in my talk earlier. I would say the major difference from all of the applications we're building right now is that when I was a PhD student, all you want is a higher quantitative measure. You want to be the state-of-the-art model. And when you're building an actual production model, you need to care about efficiency, cost, latency, and everything around it, and how to build it more responsibly. This is where one of the challenges comes from. I would say from the responsible AI perspective, what we have been building is following two logics. One is that the responsible AI has to be part of the core modeling building process. So for example, for the risk modeling where I was talking about earlier, the model was built in a way that you can examine the weight for each of the feature being used, and that's making sure certain features are not being overweighted or so. The second perspective is a very thorough governance process to make sure the model can be tested.
Okay, let me start off the examples for the other areas, because recently I have been working as the KBS AI Advisory Committee, and there the main criteria for the most important in AI was the human final confirmation is very important, because for example they adopted AI technology in the news and the crime scene investigation programs, and always in the guideline the manual confirmation for the human was very important, and they focused on the human-centric AI is most important. So I guess that this kind of principles need to be adopted to the financial service and other areas like manufacturing systems. So it might be the important point that I'd like to pose.
I mean, I all agree with whatever you just mentioned, but I'd just like to give you a different opinion on this. I mean, I was recently looking into some survey and conducted by some startup, and there it says 80% of the AI engineers, they agree that if you're talking about generative AI, prompt engineering sucks, which is very difficult to do. It's not very easy. What people think the prompt engineering is very good, I mean very easy to do. So I think the most problem, the challenge when you want to go from lab to production is the risk, what you just mentioned. What are the different types of risk? How do you detect and mitigate those risks? I think there is no such solution yet exist. There are many startups that are coming up, but only some of them are able to solve some of the problems, but not all of the problems. And another thing is what kind of analytics you want to get out of those models. Is it descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, or causal? So GenAI, people are nowadays thinking, okay, GenAI or ChatGPT you can use everywhere. It's not like that. If you have tabular data and you want to do predictive tasks, I think you should not use GenAI. You still need to go back to traditional machine learning or statistical learning. So depending on what is the task you're trying to solve, what is the use case, and with risk, if you don't think about those ahead in time, then I think you'll not be able to move your POC to production. What many of the companies are struggling right now.
I think instead of use case, I can share one experience that I'm having. It. I told you that I made like a time series forecasting models for like growth rates or whatever the weekly economy indices. The problem is that we have lots of good models and we also did lots of good pre-processing, but it didn't work at the end of the week. I mean, what I'm saying is that when you really need to forecast the value and need to put it for the policy decision, then you do not know whether the last endpoint value is outlier or not for your pre-processing, for instance. So when you really need that forecasting, it is totally different from what you have checked for your accuracy when you develop the modeling. So I think there is no answer to distinguish between it, but that's actual problems I have so far. Yeah.
So I've never been into lab myself, so I can't really talk about like how to bring lab something in the lab into production. But what I can tell you, share as an example, interesting example of like production implementation, scaling AI in large corporate is like I can tell you. So the Bloomberg CTO told me that like they built their so Bloomberg is like you guys own the Bloomberg, the largest like data platform, market data platform for financial institution, probably like the most dominant. They built the customer chatbot that generates the based on customers' inquiry, it generates the template kind of answer. And the workflow user experience goes like the analyst operator can choose that answer, select that answer as an answer, and then you can just send it away, or you can modify it, or you can ignore it. In US, the rate of first answer generated by ChatGPT, their model getting accepted straight away by the operator is 95%. It's crazy, right? But the same thing they did for their Japan market, which is another very big market for them in Asia, the rate is 5%. So the CTO like personally traveled to Japan to really find out why that's the case, and then they said the response generated by AI is not polite enough. So scaling AI is not just about performance. It's a lot about understanding the nuances and the underlying implications of the cultural background and everything.
Thank you for that. That kind of rings a bell from hearing from what you said about not being polite. I guess communication also matters for AIs. I do wish to hop back onto what Bhaskarjit and Sojong said. I do agree totally. You don't have to be using a very complex model to do easy tasks. It's like maybe an Occam's razor, right? If it's best to use a regression model, just do so without having to do a complex neural network. But also in line with what you said and what Bhaskarji said, I think being able to know how this is a responsible AI is still a task. Like any other AI model, it's a black box system. I guess simpler models like regression models, you have better explainability. That's where you go for those if you can. But using AI models, I guess there's an empirical nature. So maybe starting with Bhaskarjit, with the models on the foundational side too, like how do you audit the system? Do you have like a benchmark and say, hey, this is like a human error level, maybe 3%. If it does 2%, it's good enough. Or then more like hard measures to kind of be more like safe about the system.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question, and as well, we have been doing some research. I saw a lot of papers today in the poster session about knowledge graphs. I mean, knowledge graph is getting very popular nowadays, but because the first knowledge graph was by Google, I think back in 2006 for the search engine. But now it is very easy to build knowledge graph with the help of large language model. You just simply write a prompt. But the challenge is, again, responsibility. I mean, sometimes it generates, triplets, which is not coming from the source, data. It is, generating from its own internal knowledge. That's hallucination. Sometimes it gives you, biased, triplets as well. So when we did this, we built, by the way, the world's largest financial knowledge graph called FinReflect KG. It's available on Hugging Face as well, having 17 million of triplets using SSE 10K documents. So when we build that knowledge graph, we have the same challenge as benchmarking, because for knowledge graphs there is no such benchmark existed. So we built those benchmarks, and we had gone through a lot of manual effort to label those data points, because we have some financial experts from different companies, and they manually label those. So I think that's the only way, because nowadays I see people are also using language model to generate ground truth data as well. Well, to a certain extent that works, but again, if you don't know if if the labels itself are correct or not, right? I think you today morning talked about this classification task, where you also mentioned about human and LLM working together. So benchmarking is challenge. I mean, there are certain benchmark exists already. Like Kenzo is one of the subsidiary of S&P, so they have been following and benchmark for all the financial applications. But wherever there is no benchmark, they need to build on their own. And also another point is benchmarks are also a moving target, right? If you have built a benchmark in the last year, maybe new model that comes up next year, we already have that information built into it. So that benchmark is no longer anymore reliable. So reliability is a challenge, and if you want to build a domain specific benchmark, then I think there is no other option to manually building those benchmarks.
Any part of the audience, the panels have different ways of being responsible?
I can probably add on a little bit. I really agree with you. I think so. What we have been also doing is, in addition to just having a benchmark, we have the ongoing monitoring system. We have developed in production. How do you make sure your model's performance is on point throughout time? We do have a static kind of regression type of test to test out the models a long time, but we also have human evaluation a long time, every quarter. And that human evaluation will actually add in more human labeled data into test set. So you can also evaluate how the entire distribution slightly sweeps along time.
Can I add one more point? Because you talked about the monitoring, because this is again a topic close to my heart. I mean, if you think about what is the fundamental difference between traditional AI, I mean machine learning people now call it as traditional AI versus generative AI. Now, in traditional AI like machine learning, statistical learning, you're building the intelligence from ground up, from the scratch, because you collecting data, then you training the model, you tuning hyperparameters, choosing algorithm, or build new algorithms. So you own the IP of the model, you have the intellectual property of the model. But in generative AI, you're not building anything on your own unless you work at OpenAI or maybe Domain. We are building our own models. Unless you're working on those companies, you're just buying intelligence rather than building intelligence. So when you're buying intelligence like a commodity, like you're buying clothes, you have to test it if it is good enough for your task or not. So evaluation, what you just mentioned, is very critical. And when you mentioned about surveillance monitoring, but I think evaluation is equally critical at all the, I mean, if you compare AI development as software development lifecycle, the development stage, the pre-production stage, the production stage, and the surveillance or the monitoring stage. So you need evaluation across each of those lifecycle. But the objective of evaluation is different in each of those lifecycle. In the development stage, you do evaluation to understand how do you tune hyperparameters. In pre-production, you're evaluating to find out if before your customers break your system, you try to break your own system to see any vulnerabilities. And then you evaluate a production system to understand whether to trust or not to trust the output at this point in time. And then surveillance, just to find out if there is any better way after you have already productionized. Can we go from version 1 to version 2? So this continuous CI/CD. So that's why evaluation is very important, I think, in generative AI.
Thank you so much. I guess from my understanding, as a recap, there's ways to use benchmarks, human monitoring system, so there has to be some human design element, maybe as part of debugging and testing. I do wish to hop to maybe Hyung and Sojung on maybe the public sector too, because I believe when it comes to the public sector and like public institutions, there's more qualitative things you have to consider. As Sojung mentioned, when it comes to is this end data point an outlier? You can't just do with like a test statistically say this is an outlier. There's more like a contextual thing. For example, did the data time regime change? So is it like a different or same distribution? There's a lot of human element. So when it comes to data from either your side or using AI, I think there are more qualitative aspects too when it comes to monitoring or making sure this is a responsible AI. So I do wish to hop on that question maybe.
Okay, so first of all, I am working in the public sector, it's like a Bank of Korea, and KFTC is the institution which connects the domestic financial transactions between Korean banks, and also we are connected to the SWIFT and continuous linked settlement bank like CLS. So anyway, financial service is, especially in Korea, is the most conservative area, and what we are thinking about most important in AI adoption is that the common sense of knowledge. For example, there is a standard development in ISO, which means the International Standard Organization, and IEC, International Electricity Committee. They are trying to creating and publishing some status and standard, and which became the criteria for the evaluation. For example, recently, one of the Korean project leader, whose name is Jung Hong-jeon, who became the private sector committee member of the Korean AI National Committee, like our chair, Professor Young Jae-lee does. So he created the AI data lifecycle management standard, which is called ISO 5259. So anyway, we are trying to find out whether the lifecycle management of AI, the process follows the criteria and the evaluation in the standard. And for example, the system which adopted AI in the financial service, we are trying to find any kind of service which follows the standard for the ISO 42001. It's like ISO 27001 in the ISMS. So I guess that this kind of creation for the standard may became the common knowledge and common criteria for the evaluation, and it can enhance the trustworthiness in the entire sector of the financial service. So it can be helpful to the alleviation of the productiveness. So let me get the speech.
I think as Sid mentioned, we do a lot of qualitative work by human, not by Gen AI. They do a lot of analysis only to determine, for instance, recently Korean government offered the expenditure coupon. And then every week I analyze all the high frequency data, and I see really high peak of the credit card and check card consumption. And my model decided that this is an outlier, but actually we didn't know whether it will be the lasting effects as time goes by or not. So for that moment, we do a lot of qualitative studies by the economy analysis, but as a model developer, I want to know it exactly and suggest it. So what I do is that when we develop the outlier detection, we also check the robustness, whether new data comes and how this revision comes. And we also check whether the identified outlier really affects economic signal or not using the scenario based. So I studied economic a lot, even though I'm from the mathematics.
I guess these days, particularly finance and quant, there's a lot of need for the marriage of two different domains, and I guess there's not that many good talent in the industry. I guess people here are some of the few who can do that. I do wish to pass the question to Ju on the similar context, because as you mentioned, you focus on trying to hire really good developers, maybe with the proficiency AI tools, meaning each person does more work than what a human would have been doing a couple of years back. Then there should be some maybe checking if their work is correct. Maybe they're Git commits if it's okay, if you're like using AI to like retrieve data or like match metadata, maybe there has to be some checking elements. I guess some companies nowadays use AI to do that too, but like, what's your take on trying to check whether your AI system works well in your daily tasks?
I think it's so how I see it as a CTO standpoint of view, like having gone through a few different startup, is that the era of software programming has changed. So programmers used to compete about like who writes more elegant, high quality code, like and I was a programmer and I had a very high like pride in my profession, like. And I remember like having a lot of conversations with my developers friends about AI will replace everybody but the developers, but it's actually the other way around. That's how I see it, so now what I accepted as a paradigm shift is that now the coding is not about quality, it's more about quantity. So you were talking about like 1 year fresh grad who's really proficient with AI tools, producing like 8 or 9 pull requests a day, right? So, and if some of them have bugs and some of them have redundant code, doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Like if 5 years ago a fresh junior programmer wrote such kind of PR, that person will be yelled at, like, oh, like well, we can't accept this rubbish code, like blah blah. Now our developers standard in accepting the PR request has been a lot lower. Like so, because if you want to scrutinize like really take a detailed look into every pull request, commit logs, in details, that becomes a blocker. There's no point in using AI because like we're talking about seeing like 30 pull requests a day, and nobody can do that, right? So like in detail. So we're like, okay, so it's actually more important for each and every developers to own, feel strong ownership in using AI, and they need to know, oh, okay, so for example, like if you're using AI to write Rust-based code, there's not enough training data right now, so it can be quite like outdated. The code that it emits is very bad. But when it comes to Python 3, it's like superb quality, and TypeScript as well. So developers know these nuances, and they already know, like they are already smart enough to identify when AI does something weird. So the PR requests usually are in good qualities. But what's really important is that having some guardrails, like final kind of guardrail in your process. So we ask developers to do kind of A/B testing. So what I mean by that is, if you're gonna use AI to write the function, the actual feature, don't use AI to write the unit test for it. But if you choose to write, so it's vice versa. So you can use AI to do one of the two only. Like you can write the actual code, or you can write the actual unit test. But one of it you have to do yourself. So our engineers tend to rely on AI to write unit tests, and they produce like tons of unit tests, and so every time the new version gets released to production, all of these tests must be passed. So there's some minimum stuff that we're doing, but we're kind of like taking a bet, like taking the risk, accepting the risk. Okay, but if something fuck up, like we are here to fix it. We'll use AI to fix it in 1 hour. So we are still here. We're not like going away. So that's okay if AI does something stupid, as long as we can quickly react to it.
Thank you, Joe. I think at a high level, what I felt was, as everyone mentioned, there's like a human element auditing the system. I guess unit tests in the dev sense is more like an auditing process made scalable. So I guess I do agree that human element has to be somewhere for explainability. I guess this kind of connects to one of the last things I do wish to touch on. As Drew mentioned, there's like a human element or like a practice or a nudge recommending the developers to say, hey, when it comes to building a product, writing code, either from writing the business logic or unit test side, you have to be contributing to at least one in a primarily human way. So I guess it also boils down to whether or not just you trust the AI, or whether you trust a human using the AI. So I guess that also bounces the topic of whether there should be some regulations or practices maybe within each domain and the institution when it comes to regulating or providing guidelines for people using AI, such as its use responsibility, maybe starting with Eric.
Sure. My experience or my firm's experience is that building an AI system is easy. People is the hard part. People is always the hard part. People will always try to abuse the system. So how do we educate people to use the system, leverage it to the maximum capacity? That has always been a problem, a challenge for I think for everyone. What we have been doing, well, we actually did some A/B testing. We had a Gen AI tool for efficiency improvement. We gave it to two group of users, one with zero training. One, we actually went through a 2-hour training to educate them how to use the tool. The adoption rate, one is 85, one is 20. It's very clear people need training to understand how tools are being used. Not everyone is from the tech industry as us. And if you're not in that field, it can be quite intimidating to see all the new tools coming up. More importantly, working with the financial institution, there's a lot of governance around it. For every models in Canada, if you want to release into production, you have to build 3 tiers of a governance system. Your development team is the first tier. You have to pass a certain amount of tests yourself to justify for the model. And then at the organizational level, every bank needs to have a centralized, independent governance team. And that team will look at all of our tests. Sometimes for more serious models, they will even have to rewrite everything to replicate the result to that level. I would say for Gen AI applications, it's not that serious most of the time. And then the third tier is an auditing tier, where every year we would have some external auditing firm come in and look at all models. So with this pretty serious governance model, I think it's pretty clear that we are doing it responsibly. But the challenge here is that all of these processes need to be adapted as well, and how the governance framework should look like in the future. I don't think it's a resolved question yet. Just more.
Well, that is very important question because I think that AI ethics could be the answer for this question because nowadays I have been participating member for the IEEE Asia and Pacific section, and they are focusing on training AI ethics professionals, and they are encouraging to educate students to learn the AI ethics principles, like Harvard and principles. They have already the kind of courses which train the AI ethics, and in the corporation like KFTC, the DEI principle is very important, and I think that it might be applied to the private sector too. Diversity, equity, and inclusiveness is very important. For example, in financial services, if we just adopt the kiosk or ATM service, then blind people and the elderly people might hardly can use this. So if you'd like to offer the AI service which can replace the human banker, then the designer and the architect need to be focused on how this can be elevate the life of the human and the elderly people. So I guess that to do that, it is very important to train every employees in the institution to always think about the AI ethics and just remove the unwanted bias. So I guess that many of that might be accustomed that at the first early stage of a LLM, the machine thought that maybe man and doctor, they are more closer in the meaning than the female and the doctor. So this can be the reason of the bias. So I guess that maybe getting more data which is not biased can elevate the trustworthiness of the AI. So they are very important.
As you just mentioned about training, people on how to use these tools responsibly. But I'll talk about how to build those products responsibly as well. That is also important. I mean, at Domain, we are building a lot of agents for financial services, like for descriptive tasks and text to SQL, or for graph-based systems like GraphRag and so on. But we are also following those regulations like NIST in US, National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have come up with AI risk management framework already, and there they have already mentioned what are the different types of risks that you need to detect and mitigate when you try to deploy these applications in production. In European Union has a EU AI Act. So we recently released our domain small $10 billion parameter model, which is again the first European AI Act compliant LLM for financial services. Now there, those models, we are looking for what she just mentioned, bias. I mean, bias is again very subjective. It's very what is bias for you, it might not be bias for me. And let's say gender bias, people generally talk about, but gender bias may be not important as a quant. As a quant, maybe what she mentioned today morning, like temporal bias, locale bias, or distraction bias. I think there is no universal solution to detect those different types of risk. It can be bias or hallucination, etc. But I think for every task, it has to be a specific solution that you find out, and then add it as a new as a layer, before the you showcase it to to the client. And otherwise, what might happen is you must have heard about this news of Deloitte few weeks back. They created a report for Australian government, which was full of hallucination. So I think as I said at the beginning, most of the projects are still in POC stage. Only few of them are going to production, and to go from POC to production, you need to find out those risks and detect and mitigate them.
Well, if you have something to add on, please feel free to.
I think the responsible AI will mean different things for different segments. So, for example, using AI in a emergency center of the hospital, must have a very, very high bar before it can be rolled out. Using AI for some feature within a role-playing game, you can have a very, very lower bar. So I think we have to be really surgical about applying the kind of right standard for AI. So otherwise we may end up throttling the advancement of AI. And so I'm generally of the view that so as a financial institution, we are governed by central banks, and they already Hong Kong and Singapore, they both published some white paper about using AI responsibly, but they're all principle-based approach. They're not condition-based check boxes. They're not. I think this is just enough. If we get regulated a little too much, we'll be too scared to do anything with it. So that's fine. But I'm of the view that if someone is trying to regulate the AI because it could potentially mean people will lose the job, I'm slightly skeptical about that approach. Yeah.
May I add one more?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. I think that Dr. Lee Juan said is the very right point, and I think that it's very rational to think in that way. So, for this point of view, the standard organization, not just the public sector, they are letting many experts from the private sectors like Microsoft and Google, and in the financial industry, Citibank and the MasterCard. A lot of experts, including the security experts, are joining the standard creation process. So the first thing that they are usually the standard includes the requirements that system or people need to follow. But what they are doing nowadays is to gather in the use cases. Because like he said, a lot of sectors has different criteria. For example, in the financial service, maybe the recommendation of the investment could be the first stage, but in the medical service, protecting the private information is most important. And in Korea, because of the medical insurance system, they are all very highly protected for the personal information. So the privacy information is most important challenge in adopting AI in medical services. So I guess that first, the human need to set the guidelines for which one is most important and what could be the most weakest point and the bias. And private sectors like a global corporation like Google or Microsoft, or in Korea maybe the data companies could be one answer for that. So they can be participating, and it can be very helpful to create a common standards and include all of us.
Well, that's actually educational for me too, in that sense, where we talk about being responsible as quite high level. As Ju mentioned, there's not much like a checkbox. And also, we also saw that when it comes to responsible, how do you define responsible in this context? Like, is this bias relevant to the task I'm doing? So I guess defining what's responsible, what's a responsible system, depends on the task. And I think there was a lot of insights from that too. That was even myself, I guess, was part of the audience today. Due to time, I think we can have maybe one question from the audience. It's a rare combination to have these people in this room, so I suggest you exploit the opportunity. Oh, yes, please.
I want a question for Ju. It's like you are spending a lot of time to talk about like data strategy is important and how AI can like save money for your operations. But I'm wondering like since your company is AI native hedge fund, I'm wondering like is using AI or your unique way of using AI actually bringing some advantage to your hedge fund compared to other companies or compared to other firms? That's the question I'm very interested, because everyone can use AI, right? But you say I can deal with, especially you emphasize you will not bring your own AI model, so you are actually leveraging the outside source. So I'm very interested in what is your unique way to leverage AI?
Really good question. So I think focusing on saving money on the operational side using AI, what AeroPoint is currently doing is basically we're trying to be on par with what everyone else is doing. We're not any advanced than other companies. Like I have no issue admitting that we're just basically trying to be on par with everyone else. The holy grail, it's like where we want to get to ultimately is we want to build our own intelligence layer. And then I envision that intelligence layer will be a like modular agentic system where each bot it has been battle tested and trained by the domain expert who is responsible for that particular function. So, for example, we're now rolling out ways. We're training our department heads how to build a bot within ChatGPT Enterprise, for example, and we're also rolling out a tool called Stack AI. And with these tools, they are building AI proficiency within their own department, and they're gonna build their own bot, and they're gonna continue to rely on it. And as the base model continue to catch up, each respective bot's performance will continue to improve. Like the bot that's responsible for accounting, bot that's responsible for intraday risk, like whatever it is, like only the domain experts in that respective area can grow that bot. And with the advancement of base model at current pace, I believe that at one point these department people will start seeing the bot not just as a co-pilot, but as an actual colleague. And just imagine a future when you can start wiring all these bots into one single holistic system. Then you can start asking firm level questions. Just throw it at that agentic system, and then it decide. It collaboratively collect the intelligence from the bot that's been battle tested for 2+ years already. Then you can answer questions like, oh, okay, last night there was this FOMC meeting. Like as soon as you wake up, like the CIO might want to know which portfolio manager is most exposed and how do we delta hedge this, for example. Then these kind of analysis will take probably like 2 to 3 days for normal analysts to do it. But if let's say this agentic system can really give that answer in 20 minutes, for example, then we'll be able to enter that market, whatever the instruments that need to be used to hedge that risk. We should be able to enter that market much faster than our peers. That's the money.
I guess that the other point that I experienced in KBS is that it's really important to think about the mutual benefits and mutual interest of the individuals in the corporation. For example, KBS is using the AI for cutting down the expenses. For example, KBS is the public broadcasting company, so they own the local branches like Jeju Island or Ulang Island, but there are not a lot of people, residents. So if they are running their local branches, it is elevating their costs, so they are trying to adopt AI technology to replace human anchors. So, but AI anchors, many other individuals in the company, including announcers and anchors, they do not like that approach. And other example is that we all know that K-pop demon hunters are very, very popular between foreigners. The reason could be the K-pop idol, but for showing the K-pop idols' movements, they need at least 4 or 5 cameramen, which can make a CIKM, direct camera, for each idol members. But the Korean Broadcasting Company wanted to cutting down the expenses, so they created any new AI solution, which is called Vertigo. So it can replace 5 more cameramen into one solution. So it means that technical engineers, they might do not need a lot of engineers. So it could be another protest reason for the KBS employees. So they are deeply thinking about how they can be harmonize this kind of thing, and mutual principles for the company could be a good criteria and use case examples.
Thank you for the answer, and thank you for the great question. I think in light of time, we have to be wrapping up, unfortunately. Maybe if our panelists are hanging around, maybe they can ask a couple questions before they leave. But again, thank you for joining our panel session, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.